When most people imagine a Roman gladiator, they picture a fearless warrior standing alone in the Colosseum, roaring crowds above him, fighting for freedom with every swing of his sword. Hollywood has made gladiators symbols of rebellion, honor, and constant death. But the real life of a gladiator was far more complex, more controlled, and in many ways more human than the myths suggest. To understand the truth, we need to follow a gladiator through a single day in ancient Rome. Not the version shown on screen, but the version shaped by history. The day begins before sunrise. A gladiator does not wake in a dungeon beneath the arena. In reality, most gladiators lived in organized training schools called ludi. These were enclosed compounds, guarded and strictly regulated, but not underground prisons. Inside, rows of small but functional rooms housed fighters who trained, ate, and slept according to a strict routine. Hollywood often portrays gladiators as starving prisoners. In truth, gladiators were valuable investments. They were fed regularly, monitored closely, and kept in fighting condition by professional trainers. A typical morning began with inspection. Weapons were checked, injuries were examined. A wounded gladiator was not useless. He was expensive. Keeping him alive mattered. After inspection came training. Contrary to popular belief, gladiators did not spar constantly with sharpened weapons. They trained with wooden swords, heavier than real blades, to build strength and endurance. Hours were spent repeating the same movements again and again. Footwork, balance, controlled strikes. Defense mattered more than aggression. Hollywood depicts gladiators as wild brawlers. In reality, they were disciplined specialists. Each fighter trained in a specific style. Some carried shields and short swords. Others fought with spears and tridents. Some wore heavy armor. Others relied on speed. These styles were carefully designed to contrast each other, creating visually exciting but controlled matches. The goal was not chaos. It was spectacle. By mid-morning, training ended. The fighters rested, cleaned their equipment, and ate. This is where another myth falls apart. Gladiators did not feast on meat-heavy diets. Archaeological evidence shows their meals were mostly plant-based: grains, beans, vegetables. This diet built muscle while reducing fat, making wounds less severe and healing faster. They were sometimes called barley men for this reason. Hollywood rarely shows this side of gladiatorial life. It is quieter, less dramatic, but far more accurate. As the day progressed, tension built. If games were scheduled, gladiators prepared mentally long before stepping into the arena. Contrary to popular belief, most gladiators did not fight to the death every time. Death was expensive. Owners did not want their fighters killed unless absolutely necessary. Many matches ended when one gladiator conceded defeat. The defeated fighter raised a finger, signaling surrender. At that moment, the crowd did not decide his fate alone. The sponsor of the games, often a wealthy politician, had the final say. Hollywood shows thumbs deciding life or death instantly. Reality was slower, more calculated, and often merciful. By afternoon, fighters scheduled to compete were escorted to holding areas near the arena. Not dark torture chambers, but guarded corridors where they waited, listened, and focused. They could hear the crowd. They could smell dust, sweat, and smoke. This waiting was often worse than the fight itself. Gladiators knew their opponent. They knew the rules. They knew the style of combat they were expected to perform. Yes, perform. That is another truth Hollywood ignores. Gladiatorial combat was not random violence. It was choreographed within limits. Not scripted, but guided. The goal was to entertain. A fast death disappointed the crowd. A prolonged, skillful fight thrilled them. When a gladiator finally stepped into the arena, he was not fighting for freedom in that moment. freedom was rare. Only a small number ever earned it, usually after many years of service. Most fought for survival, reputation, and honor within their controlled world. The arena itself was overwhelming. Tens of thousands of spectators, noise echoing off stone, heat rising from sand. Hollywood gets this part right, but it exaggerates the chaos. Real fights followed structure. Referees were present, rules were enforced, illegal strikes could be stopped. This was closer to a regulated sport than a street fight. Injuries happened, blood was real, but the intention was not constant slaughter. Despite popular belief, gladiators were not universally despised. Many were celebrities. Their images appeared on pottery and graffiti. Children admired them. Women followed their careers. Some gladiators gained fame that rivaled modern athletes. Hollywood often portrays gladiators as forgotten slaves. Reality was more complicated. Some gladiators were enslaved, others volunteered. Debt, poverty, desire for fame. The arena offered food, housing, and the possibility of social status that ordinary life could not. This does not make it humane, but it makes it understandable. After a match, surviving gladiators were treated. Wounds were cleaned, bones were set. Medical care in gladiator schools was surprisingly advanced. Doctors specialized in treating combat injuries. A gladiator who survived a fight returned not to chains, but to routine. Rest, recovery, preparation. As evening fell, the games ended. Crowds left. The arena fell silent. Gladiators returned to their quarters. Some celebrated survival. Others mourned fallen companions. Hollywood shows gladiators dying alone. In reality, they trained, lived, and bonded together. They were rivals in the arena, but part of the same system. The day ended much like it began. Controlled, regulated, predictable, not heroic freedom, not constant brutality, but a life shaped by discipline, risk, and performance. So why does Hollywood get it wrong? Because the truth is less simple. Freedom stories sell better than contracts. Chaos looks better on screen than structure. But the real story of gladiators is more revealing. They were not symbols of rebellion against Rome. They were products of Roman society. They reflected its values: order, hierarchy, spectacle, power. The arena was not just about justice. It was about control, the illusion of choice, the display of dominance. And that is what makes the real history of gladiators more unsettling than the movies. They were not fighting the system. They were the system. When the crowd cheered, it was not celebrating freedom. It was participating in a ritual that reinforced Roman power. Hollywood turns gladiators into heroes who resist oppression. History shows us something more complex. Men trapped in a violent profession. Sometimes famous, sometimes respected, sometimes admired, but always owned by the rules of the world they lived in. A day in the life of a gladiator was not constant death. It was constant preparation. And the real drama was not just in the arena. It was in surviving long enough to fight again. If you enjoyed this documentary, consider subscribing for more explorations of history beyond myth and spectacle. Thank you for watching.